Well, auditing firm Nkonki's voluntary liquidation has sparked major reaction in industry. This came soon after the Auditor-general decided to cut ties with the firm, while Nkonki has said this is a setback in transforming financial services. One analyst says there's more to the firm's closure that goes beyond the AG's recent decision. For more on that, we're joined now by Ignaz Fuskin, who's MD of management consulting firm Cormap. Thank you so much for your time today. Why do you think the AG is not to blame here in this case?
Good evening, Siki. Thanks for having me. I believe the story goes beyond actually just the Auditor-General's decision to initiate the liquidation procedure. First of all, before talking about it, I'd like to express it's a very sad moment for the industry to see a promising firm like Nkonki, actually Nkonki Sunninghill, because the other entities are obviously all outside the liquidation process, see Nkonki Sunninghill going into liquidation, closing its doors. And personally, I wish all the best actually to Tutu Masasa and her leadership team. And I'm quite sure once the liquidation is over, we will see her and her team rise again and then establish a new firm, most likely under a new brand and in a new actually setup. To your question, I believe what we actually facing here is a general problem that goes beyond just Nkonki's failure to finance its operations. Based on what we see in the market, we see a lot of small and medium-sized professional services firms, auditors, lawyers, and others. And we see and experience that they're all actually focusing very much so just on work coming through from government. And if we compare their situation with, for instance, KPMG's and PwC's situation, and we wonder why is someone like Nkonki Sunninghill then actually ending up in a liquidation process, and why is KPMG not going the same route, we need to ask ourselves what is different. And
so what is Nkonki's revenue structure?
The revenue structure is a monoculture. A lot of those actually small and medium-sized, promising small professional service firms engage with government entities, affiliates of government, and they have no balanced client portfolio. They simply have no private sector clients. So if one of those government pipelines stops at some point, if the work is gone, the business is gone. And that's the huge difference in comparison to firms like KPMG. They may take a financial hit, a serious hit, and they may actually be forced to restructure operations, but they still actually are hedging the business with private sector work. Now that is actually not available to someone with a structure like that.
Does this then not make the case for those who say that we need mandatory audit firm rotation, so that those smaller firms that don't necessarily always get a bite of the cake might then get the bite of the private sector cake?
Yes and no. I would say we need to actually move way beyond that point and look at the fundamentals of those businesses. The question is why in the first place, and this is also our experience when actually coaching those firms, consulting to them, why in the first place is there an assumption to just focus on government work? And why is there actually a belief that government work is the only work available? And secondly, it's easier to win that piece of work than any other work.
What do they tell you?
As I said, this is the assumption that we hear, and our response, my personal response and view in that regard is, I believe it's not easier to win government work. It's in most cases even more complex for the small and medium-sized firms in that space, because if you look at a tender process, it's an anonymous process, it's a very bureaucratic, quite a time-intensive process, and it's a huge investment for a small and medium-sized firm like that in terms of the amount of mandates that you need to put into this. And the second assumption is then probably a bit more difficult. Now, looking at, is there an alternative to government work? Now I believe we need to actually honestly take stock of what we have in the country. And we also need to look at things like existing networks, relationships, and so forth. So the question is there actually an alternative to government work for those firms? And you know, I'm a mentor at Chanduka Black Umbrellas, and we often experience as mentors, there's none, because these networks exist for a long, long time. And to break them up is sometimes, in most cases, almost impossible for those small enterprises to get in. And I believe the only way to overcome this obstacle, also in terms of the wider transformation of the professional services sector, is to have mentors to help and assist. And this is exactly where I believe incubators and mentorship organizations like Shanduka Black Umbrellas can play a huge role to get into these networks and allow those firms also to move in the private sector space.
We'll leave it there. Thanks for your time. Today, Ignaz Fuskin is MD of management consulting firm Cormap. Now, South Africa.